Welcome back, class. Now is what we're going to do is we're going to pick up the idea of the envelope. Now the envelope is going to work in relation to gesture drawing. It's going to help you to structure an object at its widest and highest points. And it's kind of a technique that would be like when you look at this pear that's sitting here, if I was to eliminate, say, little things like the stem, and I put this into a very tight configuration, you get a triangle if you map it out all the way around. But sometimes a triangle isn't vertical. In this case, for me, it's pretty close to being vertical, but if it's tipped, we look for those things. So the envelope is boxing something out, or not really boxing, but like putting a tight sheet over something, and where does it hit its extremes? And then we gesture the object within it. And so you're looking for that structure. So I'm going to show you a few of these, starting with a very simple object, and then we'll move to something a little more complex. So anyways, we're going to start with this pear. So with the envelope is what we do is we look for our highest point, and we would start with that. So I'm going to start with my highest point. I'm going to make the line. Usually we could measure the width to the height. On this, I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to kind of play with its general shape and try to get it right. I'm deciding the bottom. Normally is what we would do with sighting. We take a stick, and we maybe talked about this very little bit, but you have a sighting stick. This stick works very well. You can use long matchsticks, knitting needles, or like shish kebab sticks. These things is what you'll do is you'll measure, and we always measure with our arms stretched out like this, never part of the way. And we measure and we wink an eye, and I'll take the width of it at its widest point from back here. For me, it's like this, and I'll measure it into its height. My arm's always outstretched. When I do that, I see that the width of it is almost equal to its height, not quite, it's a little lower. So I would keep that in mind if I wanted to. I might say my wide point is here. And when I start to block it out as the envelope, I could say this distance, how does it work to this? And say it doesn't still, that means it's even going to be wider. And so I would say for that height, it's going to work to about like that. So what we do, I'm going to look at this angle. And so if I take an angle, I could take it from there to my widest. And I'm going to say the widest is down here. And I'm going to run a line doing this. And it looks like my widest being about here, and then I'm going to straighten it up for the side, and then I begin to see it angle in, like this. Now, this angle that I'm placing should match the angle that's there. So you take your sighting stick and you say that overall angle is this angle. That's pretty close. The side of it for me is pretty straight. It does this and that does that. My widest point, where is it? Okay, so I'm looking for it. Now this might be a little high for my widest point, so I could juggle it, I could bring it down. Anyways, the top of this, I'm going to do this with it, and then I'm going to look at the other side, and I'm going to say, what is that to my widest point? And you can see it hits right there. And so I'm going to strike in that angle. Now that angle should correspond, and it does. And so then I look at it straightens out. And it straightens out about right there. And then after that, it takes an angle in. And then you do this. So this becomes our envelope. So it gives us our relationships. If I had it right, this distance would be close to this distance. It's pretty close. And so I would leave it, it's quite symmetrical in this point, at this way of thinking. So from that, you would gesture. And so in that, you would say, oh, those aren't really straight lines. They're convex lines. We talked about convex, concave. The top of it curves to the left. And so I'm going to look at the top part. It curves to the left. This curve comes a little higher, and it begins to move in. So again, work with your gesture. So now it's going to put a little more of a length this way, and it's going to turn this way. But is what we've established with the envelope is we establish the most important points. This point to this to the widest, this to this. So all the relationships work. So as I begin to work with my gesture, I've already got the bigger relationships in place. So now the top of this looks like a thimble to me, so I might put a curve through it. The side of it is right where it ought to be, and so now it makes not really straight lines there, but it makes a curve. And then this, I can bring the curve out, so now these two pieces meet, and not quite out that far, but then that meets. And then you bring it through and around, and you might see some shadows. We're not after shadows, but I am after, you could be after the widest point of it. So I could begin to put that curve in. Okay? And so, so then we get a little bit of the sense of what the gesture is doing. And then our stem is an add-on, and then we can put the stem in whatever direction it goes. Okay? So that's our first simple gesture. Every now and then I have to rearrange the charcoal. So, gesture with a pear. So now is what we're going to do is we're going to change objects, and we'll take something, say, a little more complicated. Let's just put this guy up here. So now I'm going to look at him, and we're going to think about it in the same way. So remember, with the envelope, we look at our highest points. So I'm going to do this. So my highest point is there. So I'm going to take and run this, and I'm going to say, when I look at it from where I'm at, I'm looking at that highlight, and I go right through the center. It hits the center of his chest. And so for me, his head, the top of his head is about like this. And his chest, where it runs through, is here. And the angle of the front of his chest goes this way. Now remember, when you're using a sighting stick, we do it like a clock, like the face of a clock. I don't tip this into space. I get my angle by doing it this way. So you got like 12 o'clock, 1, 2, 3. So you're turning because your paper's flat. You don't want this angle existing. So I have to look up there and say, what is the angle? I keep this parallel to my face, and I just turn it to the angle that will be there. So if I keep this parallel to my face, the angle I put in is the angle I see. And so that works well. And so anyways, that's doing that. And now the next thing, I'm going to figure out this beak. So I could measure a little, and I could measure by putting this at the tip, my thumb at the bottom, outstretch your arm, and you get that measurement. I'm trying to figure out, is it midway down? Is it lower? Where is it? Where does it happen to be? I'm going to go up, and it looks like it's not exactly midway, but it's close. So what I'm going to do, if you figure out midway, and these are gestures, so I'm not worrying about these proportions being perfect. I want to get you used to just thinking this way. So I'm going to say the beak is up a little bit higher. It's a little higher than midway. Now the question is, what is this angle? So from where you're at, I put a flat part on the top of his head. And so now I'm going to think about that angle. And so when I just checked it, the angle is very much like this. And so I do that, place in my angle. I'm going to take it from the back. Well, let's go this way first. So I'm going to take it from this way on him, and I'm going to look at the angle that tilts back in space. And this is a depth line. It's going back. So he's going back that way. That's the angle I get. And then it begins to, as an envelope, it begins to go up. And then, now this is a key. Now we haven't gotten into perspective yet, but this angle has to be the back of his tail at the same angle. These two angles have to be parallel. In other words, this angle here and this angle got to be the same, and this one will be eventually too. So now I've got the back of him placed. Now I can check things, because this is going to be my envelope right here, but I'm just kind of plotting it. So I can take this height back there, and I can run a horizontal line through, keep it parallel to your eyes. When I run it through, it hits his beak. So that's telling me this is off. And so that's telling me this has got to go up higher, okay, at least to there, okay, if not even higher. But I want to make sure I keep my angles right. So it's got to at least go as high as I've got it, which is now better. So from there to there seems to work. So you guys see what I did. I took the back of his tail, ran a line horizontally across, and did that. When I do it, it's just a little bit lower, and so that should be pretty close. Okay. So now I can take this line. If it's all going well, I can block that out for the envelope. I can check it, and I want to see, is it close? And it's telling me it's off a little bit. It's telling me something is off. Either this has got to come out a little bit more, and I've got to watch that angle, and they should line up. The two of them should work together if I have it. So I'm going to do that with it, okay? So anyways, once we have it, I'm going to take its beak and go to the chest, and those two lines, when you place them, when you watch their angles, they should work. Like this angle to this angle. So this angle as this place, they should be the same. They should be parallel. So there's your envelope, okay? I am citing certain areas in order to get them placed. So now is what I'm going to do is place in the head. So now gesture. So begin to gesture in a shape for the head. So I'm going to place his head in here. This was the middle of his head. The middle of his head. The angle of the beak came down this way. The bottom edge of the beak is now this way. A little bit of a curve there. I'm going to keep this angle this way, across this area here. So you want to watch this angle, watch this angle. And then we're going to take this line, and I'm going to bring it out and bring this one down. We're going to watch this point. It's nice. You can measure. I'm just going to sight it real loosely. So I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to check out, where is his chest? How far out is his chest? They should be close, but I'm going to run it up and see. And it looks pretty close, so I'm going to keep it there. Ultimately, this has a curve. There's a front to this, meaning this angle and this angle want to be parallel. This is the side, so now it should turn. And this is his back. All right, this angle, we've already got it in place. The front of his chest. This becomes the center now, what we call the center of them, the perspective center line in there. There's going to be an angle on the side of him coming this way. And we're going to watch the back of his body, where it might be. It's going to be up probably about at least as high as that. And then I'm going to watch the top curve. So watch now, this is the gesture. Now we're just gesturing it in. I'm going to move my charcoal a little bit and finish it up. So keep checking your points. This curve of his tail goes back. I'm right over here. I'm going to check it on a horizontal line, and it seems to want to come up a little bit, which is good. I'm glad, because it needs to. And then this begins to curve this way, and then we begin to get our tail out a little bit more, which is good. And this goes this way. And we get them placed in. Top plane, side plane. And again, the proportions are a little off at this early stage. Don't worry about it too much. Just begin to try to get the sense of these lines and with the measuring within. Okay? I'm going to stop that and show you one last drawing. And you should get the idea. So our last one, feel free to use different things. Like we'll put a vase. You can use stuffed animals that work out great, apples, but try different objects, whatever you have around the house. So this one, this old vase, we'll check it out. This one's easy because our central line, like you're always going to do, place that in. Watch your bottom. And there's our very top. It's nice if your line is straight, of course. The next thing I'm going to watch with the envelope, I am going to come down. This is my center line. I'm going to come across. For me, I'm keeping this. I mean, you could turn it any way. Whatever way it would be its tilt. I'm going to keep it pretty much front and center for me. It won't be for you. So how low is this horizontal line off of your highest point? So that's what I'm trying to find. So I'm trying to say, how wide is this? How much higher is this? Now, if this is my widest point, I can measure that to the height. So now extend your arm, measure the width, and measure it into the height. And actually, which sometimes these things are really amazing, the width for me is actually wider than it is high. And it doesn't appear to be that way, but that's what it seems to be when I measure. When in doubt, you can always measure twice. So take that distance, measure it going this way, and I have to make this a very little bit shorter. So those proportions should be pretty good now. So if you get the height to the width in any object, okay, now I've got them a little bit equal. Let me see what I've got here again. If you can get the height to the width of any object and then gesture it in, your relationship should be pretty accurate. So I'm going to bring it up just a little bit more to make it, I'm going to try to get this one a little more accurate than what I did the last, okay? So we'll get that placed, so there we go. So with that in mind, it's kind of easy. So I couldn't measure any symmetrical object. You could take this distance, measure it into this distance, make sure it's accurate. So again, now we've got the height, we've got the width, and so there shouldn't be any problem doing the envelope. So now we can connect our points, of course, and this would be good to measure from this side to that side, bring it through, so you got the symmetry. Once you have those points, of course, now you're on your way to the gesture. So we could take, what is this little thing up here? I'm just going to make a little shape, and then it's got a top part to it. Watch your symmetry. Watch this distance from that distance. It is nice to measure these things. What is the distance of the spout in light of the handle? They look to be pretty equal. So I'm going to try to keep it a little bit equal on both sides. And then we're going to go for the body of it. So the widest point of this thing is about midway. So I'm going to look for roughly the widest point. I would have you measure these two distances, make sure they work, and then connect it in. This, as you notice, it hits our point here, which would be our point here. So watch those things. So gesture that in. And then we can figure out where the bottom of the handle is. If our widest point of the vase is here, it looks like it's going to be somewhere in through here. And the spout, the same. Don't be afraid to run guidelines through. This spout is coming to this point. So now you can generalize this up. I see it as a little bit of a concave here, so I'm just going to generalize it with a concave. And then it hits up against the object, so gesture it from my side. And we talked about convex, concave lines in the tape just prior. And so now we've got convex, concave. This is very concave. The spout on the top. Place that in and make your curve. starts off concave, and then it turns into a convex. Okay, concave, convex. This one on this side becomes a little lower as your gesture, and then turns to a convex, concave. It has this wonderful little decorative handle, and then a very concave. Again, keep watching concave, convex lines. And then the same here. Very convex, it's a concave. So we would put that in like that, and then this was our lowest point. So we're going to connect the bottom of the vase. And so then you gesture in the lower part. Concave. And if this has a curve to it, we'll be talking all about ellipses. But, you know, just be aware of what you see. And then you get your object. So again, the envelope, you're always starting with your highest point. Some have, like this does, it has a widest. Some of them didn't have it equal on both sides. And then you're watching it as if it was put into a tight sheet configuration. Once you have that, gesture out the feel of the whole thing. That's where you start to work loosely. And then we can even throw a few curved lines on there for a good look. Okay? Enjoy this process while you're working. Again, working with the gesture within a very calculated space. Seems like a contradiction, but eventually you're going to see how the two come together quite nicely to come up with looseness as well as accuracy.